Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea Tranquility. I'm your host, Pete Pardo, publisher and CEO of SOT. Today we got a little book review here for you. The new autobiography from Mr. Steve Hackett, former lead guitarist of Genesis and pretty amazing solo artist, also briefly a member of GTR back in the 80s. It's called A Genesis in My Bed, or A Genesis in Me Bed, right? Weimer Publishing. Just out recently. This book it actually talks quite a bit about Steve's kind of upbringing and his childhood, leading into him getting accepted into the ranks of Genesis, one of the great prog rock bands of all time, as well as, moving on from that band, going solo, forming GTR with Steve Howe, and then continue on with his solo career. It takes pretty much right up to the present day. So what do I think of this book? I tell you, I had a really hard time getting a copy of this book. It took me forever to get this. And then Amazon.com had stated that they shipped it, and then there was never any tracking information given, and just never arrived. I finally was able to get a hold of someone over there who went out and sent me another copy, and it finally arrived. And I will have to say, I love Steve Hackett. I love talking to him recently. I was really looking forward to this book. I will have to say, I'm kind of in the middle about it. I think, first of all, it's really short. It's 160 pages, thereabouts, 160 something pages long. It's a fairly quick read, and in the middle there's all sorts of cool live photographs and photographs from his childhood and photographs of him with Genesis and what have you. So it's cool stuff here. Love the cover. Him with his Gibson Les Paul Gold Top. I found sometimes these rock stars when they do autobiographies, they usually hook up with a co-author who kind of really helps them put the book together and make it all kind of flow a little better. I think that Steve could have used someone like that for this book. To me, a lot of this book just sounds like comes across as a quick 2-hour discussion with someone who you're sitting next to, who really gives you an abridged version of everything that they're talking about. So I kind of feel yes, there's some good stories in here. I feel like I wanted to hear a lot more. And I think that, and I get it, it's part of his childhood and growing up, but a lot of the book is spent on his pre-Genesis days, while he was a kid. I mean, the first, what seemed like about 70, 75 pages, or thereabouts, maybe not quite, maybe at least the first 50 pages, which made for a kind of slow going to start the book. Some good stories, though. Obviously, he has a lot of warm memories of his childhood. And then I felt like his time period in Genesis was really rushed in here, because he was in the band for a good from 1971 through to 77, and I just felt like when you started getting into the meat of him joining the band and making those albums and the tours. That was it. And I kind of wanted to hear more of that, because it just seemed like there should have been a lot more stories about the tours, the bands they played with, and the making of the albums and all that kind of stuff. There's really not a lot of discussion at all in here about his guitar technique, the kind of guitars he likes to use, equipment, all that kind of stuff. It's just it just comes across as kind of a brief memoir sort of thing. And he goes into much more detail about his solo career, which is really cool, but not great detail. All right, he kind of touches on some of the albums briefly, some more than others. Talks a little bit about the band members, talks a little bit about the problems with the record labels and that sort of thing. He talks about some personal stuff, failed marriages and relationships and that sort of thing. He talks about depression and anxiety stuff and that whatever, and that's all cool. I just felt at 160 pages that the entire book felt really rushed. And I think, Steve, I think, tried really hard to throw in kind of like quirky and charming little anecdotes and bits of humor in places when describing things. That to me sounded a little forced. Like he makes like little jokes in the book, and he would compare things to amplifiers or guitars or musical things and what have you. And I get it. I think it was a cool idea. I don't know. To me, I've read tons of biographies and autobiographies of musicians and rock stars and what have you, and I just felt that this one could have been a lot better. It's still pretty good. It's still pretty charming, and maybe that's what it's all about, right? Because this is Steve Hackett we're talking about. This is not Eddie Van Halen or Jimi Hendrix with all the wild and crazy stories. So, and maybe my expectations should have been tempered a little bit, but I felt like I definitely got to know Steve Hackett the man a little better. I definitely felt like Steve was sitting next to me telling me the story. I mean, that came across in a big way. And I guess that is, like I said, that is probably the charm of this book. I just felt like there just needed to be more. It felt like there's more to this tale of who is Steve Hackett than we got here. I wanted desperately to hear more about his guitar playing and how he feels about it, and the type of guitars and equipment he's used and trusted throughout his life. Not really a lot of that. I wanted to hear more about his relationships, I should say, with his band members in Genesis. I wanted to hear more about the tours. I wanted to hear much more about the creation of the albums. And I get it, he wasn't one of the main songwriters in the band. I get all that. But I just felt like the Genesis chapters just kind of and they were a great part of the book. I mean, they were enchanting reading. It went by so quickly, and then I was kind of like, that's it. And again, I know he wasn't in the band for a terribly long time, but it just seemed like there would be more. But you do get a good kind of historical perspective of especially the early part of his solo career. I felt like the last decade or two kind of was rushed through, but most people probably want to read about the Genesis years, Voyage of the Acolyte, Spectral Mornings, Defector, that whole period in time. So from the early 70s through about the mid 80s, you get a lot of that. When I talked to Steve a couple months ago, he told me there was going to be, plenty of information in the book about his time in GTR. It's like a page and a half. I mean, it's like you blinked and you would have missed it. And, a lot of times when I'm reading late at night. So, reading always gets me ready to go to sleep. And if I happen to stumble upon the GTR section, before I actually conked out, I might have missed the entire thing. That's how brief it was. So you don't get really any insight into, he hints at working with Steve Howe was an interesting collaboration, but they had a lot of different ideas about what the band should sound like, but he doesn't really go into any detail about it. Doesn't really talk about, what it was like to play alongside Steve Howe, have these two legends together. There's really no insight into that. There's no real insight into, he was part of in this band with this whole prog rock movement, but yet you get a little bit of a mention of, yes, here and there, a little mention of Van de Graaff Generator, I believe, and King Crimson in a couple spots. That's really it. So not a lot of talk. I'm sure he rubbed elbows with a lot of the big stars of the day. He does talk about meeting Clapton and a bunch of other big names and Brian May and so on and so forth. But I just, I don't know. I liked it. I was expecting a lot more, I guess. So don't let this, dissuade you from checking this book out, because I think if you're a fan of Steve Hackett, you have to read it. Like I said, I think I know the man a little bit better after reading it. I guess I wanted to know him a little bit better. I wanted to hear more of the stories. When I talked to him recently, I've talked to him a couple times, he's got a ton of stories to tell. I just felt like he held back a little bit here. And maybe he put this together really quickly. It just seemed like there could have been a lot more here. But I still love him. It's still an interesting read, so check it out. Weimer Publishing, A Genesis in My Bed by Steve Hackett. What's interesting about the title, without spoiling too much, but it has to do with a story about a groupie in, I believe he said, New York City, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. So that's kind of what that's all about. But anyway, check it out. Like I said, good read. I felt it lacking a little bit, but still, it was fun. Weimer Publishing. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on YouTube all the damn time. See you guys later on today. Got a couple big things happening for all of you. So, John Petrucci coming on the show. John Petrucci, the lead guitarist from Dream Theater. So he'll be appearing on Sea of Tranquility today. I will be appearing on the Guitar Hack YouTube channel tonight for a 3-person discussion of our favorite Kiss albums of all time. So that's coming up 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight on the Guitar Hack YouTube channel. And there's a separate video on here for that announcement that you can click on to go to the link to the Guitar Hack YouTube channel. So see you guys later on with more stuff. All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.